Good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone. Now that I've decided to take a break from Thomas and Friends, it's time for me to review something different but familiar on my channel. And I've decided that to be the Rocky film series. These are a series of films that are iconic to the world of cinema. From its production to its characters, its iconic speeches, its highs, its lows, and all being centred around the theme of motivation. I adore these films, and I say this as someone who only watched them for the very first time back in 2019, so there's no nostalgia bias whatsoever. It was July, and I was on a road trip around Europe with my sister, my dad, and his partner. During the long drives from one stunning location to another, or just late at night while everyone else was asleep, I decided to watch some films on my Kindle Fire to pass the time. Among these films were Deep Blue Sea, a very middle-of-the-road shark film but kind of a cheesy guilty pleasure of mine, and the first 4 Rocky films. I had been aware of the series of the films for a while, and so I knew their popularity going in, 4 especially. My earliest memories go as far back as being shown Rocky's speech to his son in Rocky Balboa back in an assembly when I was in high school, probably because the teachers were trying anything to motivate us to do well in our exams. It wasn't until I got to college where my classmates and I were shown the opening to the first film by one of the teachers. It made me curious to try the series out, and when I saw them available to watch for free as part of my mum's then Prime membership on Amazon, I thought, sure, why not? And from then on, I was hooked. So hooked in fact that I may have taken that excitement a bit too far and joined a boxing club as a hobby to relieve my stress, and because of the YouTuber boxing craze flowing in my mind at the time. Remember that crappy gameplay series of me playing Wii Sports Boxing until I beat the hardest CPU, Matt? Remember that wobbly boxing stand I punched with boxing gloves in my documentary of the first week of the COVID pandemic? Yep, that was me and my silly old Rocky craze. I did eventually stop going to the boxing club itself because despite being 18, I kept on being put in the kids group, which was embarrassing. And I also got rid of the boxing stand because I couldn't hit it too hard without it falling over. And it also meant that my mum got her garden back without having to drag the heavy stand around. Sorry for that, Mum, if you're watching. But yeah, the Rocky films were quite the viewing experience. And so, I want to dedicate time to them as my first non-Thomas related review series for the next few months. 1 to Balboa. I'll save the Creed films for another time as I've only just recently watched Creed 1 and so I need time to let it sink in, and I'm still yet to watch Creed 2. For now, let's take a look at the iconic beginning chapter of this legendary franchise of films. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my review series for Rocky. Sylvester Gardenzio Stallone. Born in a charity hospital in New York City, he had a part of his facial nerve damaged due to the hospital using forceps during his birth. He spent much of his infancy life in boarding care, rejoined his family in Maryland at the age of 5, moved and stayed in with his dad after his parents' divorce in 1957, and then moved in with his remarried mother in Philadelphia at the age of 15. He attended the American College of Switzerland and became interested in becoming an actor. So, upon returning to the United States, he then studied at the University of Miami. When he moved to New York to pursue his career, however, he struggled to find work. Stallone was rejected by 1,500 different agents, and sometimes he'd end up revisiting the same agencies up to 8 and 9 times, even those that took the piss out of him. Because of this, he and his wife at the time, Sasha Kizak, I hope I'm saying that right, started to struggle with money. His first on-screen appearance was a film I cannot for the life of me find the name of, but basically he appeared for 20 seconds as a thug who gets beat up on screen. He also appeared in an adult film called The Party at the Kitty and Studs, later named The Italian Stallion. So yeah, Stallone was a very small name in the industry back then, and despite some uncredited appearances both in the TV show Bananas by Woody Allen and the film Clute by Alan P. Pakula, things were dour. Even after his first Hollywood appearance in the 1974 film Lords of the Flatbush, a historical drama about teenagers in the 1950s, he still couldn't catch a break. to a point where he had to sell his dog Butkus as he couldn't afford to feed him, and stole and sold his wife's jewellery, to which she was understandably salty about. Life was bleak for him. However, it was one major event in 1975 that would lead into becoming the big inspiration for Rocky. One impactful moment.
The heavyweight championship of the world at stake.
Stallone went to the Richfield Coliseum in Richfield Township, Summit County in Ohio, to watch boxer Chuck Wepner take on boxing champion Muhammad Ali. Wepner on the surface seemed like someone who stood no chance against Ali, but, against the odds, he went the distance to the 15th and final round before Ali finally won by knockout. He even knocked Ali down in what is recorded as one of 4 fights Ali has ever been knocked down in. Despite the fight itself being classed as dirty, I might add, as the referee allowed Wepner to pull a load of unfair punches, that didn't change the fact that Stallone was mesmerised by what he saw.
I saw a man they called the Bayonne Bleeder who didn't have a chance at all against, the greatest fighting machine, supposedly, that ever lived.
Here's left. Oh! A vicious shot to the rib of Muhammad.
For one brief moment, this supposed stumblebum turned out to be magnificent in the fact that he lasted and knocked the champion down. I said, boy, if this isn't a metaphor for life. His entire life crystallized at that moment. He will be remembered for all eternity, at least among the fight fans. He did something extraordinary. I said, now that is probably what I need as a catalyst.
Heavily inspired by the fight he had just seen, Stallone decided to write a script on the idea of an everyday down-on-his-luck boxer and his moment in the spotlight. He wrote for 3 days, and by the end of it, the script itself was only about 90 pages long. The same day he finished it, he was at a casting call for an acting role, which he quickly realised he wasn't the right choice for. It was held by producers Robert Chartoff and Irwin Winkler, who he spoke with on the way out and told them about his idea. They told him to bring it by later, which he did. Rob and Irwin loved the script, but had one problem with it. They didn't want Stallone to play the main lead. Other casting suggestions more acquainted with Hollywood productions were Ryan O'Neal, Burt Reynolds, Robert Redford, and James Cameron. They continuously offered Stallone money for his script, going from $25,000 to $100,000 to $150,000, $175,000, $250,000, and eventually reaching an offer of $330,000 before realising it was clear Stallone would not budge. Considering the guy only had $100 to his name and had to travel by bus because the engine in his car blew up, I find it crazy how he turned down such a large amount of money that was just one handshake away just so he could star as the main character in his own story. Clearly he had some belief in this.
And I thought, all right, you've really managed poverty very well. You've got this down to a science. You really don't need much to live on. I had sort of figured it out. So I was not in any way used to the good life. I know in the back of my mind, if I sell this script and it does very, very well, I'm going to jump off a building. And if I'm not in it, there's no doubt about it, I'm going to leap in front of a train. I'm going to be very, very upset. So this is one of those things where you just roll the dice and you fly by the proverbial seat of your pants. Say, all right, I got to try it. I got to just do it. I may be totally wrong, and I'm going to be taking a lot of people down with me, but I just believe in it.
And with that, he agreed to play the main lead for no money, and production on the film began. Despite having a budget of $1 million to make the film itself, this was still a substantially small amount of money. To compare it to films released around that time, the first Star Wars and Alien had a budget of $11 million, Star Trek the Motion Picture had a budget of $35 million, and Superman the Movie had a whopping $55 million for its budget. Granted, they are of a completely different genre to Rocky, but it should really go to show how low of a budget this film had compared to them. Even the smaller scale films in the 70s still had substantially bigger amounts to spend, like Jaws, which cost $9 million to make, or the 1978 Death on the Nile, costing an estimate of $7.9 million. The only other film of that time comparable to Rocky's budget was Taxi Driver, but even that just edges it out with a cost of $1.9 million. Every cent and every hour spent on this film, in order to get it made, was going to have to travel across the ocean of potential bankruptcy aboard the HMS Careful, especially since they were using an experimental camera mount called the Steadicam. Invented in 1975 by Garrett Brown, this camera mount was built to stabilise the level of the camera and allow for smooth, long shots, separated from however jagged the cameraman was moving. Nowadays, this type of camera work is a lot more common in not just TV and film, but even online videos. It's everywhere. But back then, to have the actual camera be moved around during shooting without the shaky cam look of bouncing up and down and all around must have been so awesome. It's actually why I love films like the John Wick series, with how the action scenes look so much cooler when the camera is able to focus on every detail during the action scenes. And is why films like Jason Bourne feel like they gave a GoPro to someone on an overdose on caffeine. You can note this camera being used in scenes like when Rocky climbs the stairs, but I'll save that for later. There was so much preparation and practice that needed to be done for the big fight scenes, as they essentially had 6 weeks to shoot it. Makeup and fight tests were filmed by the director John G. Avildsen on 8mm film, so he could use it as a way to show Stallone playing Rocky and actor Carl Weathers as his opponent Apollo Creed what they needed to do to improve the fighting.
I started using 8mm footage when I first started making features, using it as a blueprint, sketch pad. Shooting things with a little 8mm camera allowed me to try this size lens, that angle, this lighting condition. I found it very helpful. We used it to help Sylvester lose some weight, because I'd zero in on his waistline, and I said, they're going to be looking at you, they're not going to be looking at me, so he took that to heart.
When they first showed up to rehearsals, however, they realised very fast that they were going to be here forever when they were constantly saying, I'm going to do this move and I'm going to do that move and stuff for ages. So Avildsen asked Stallone to write the fight choreography himself. Every jab, every hook, every uppercut, dodge, step and fall, Stallone wrote down, and he and Weathers learnt how to perform it, almost like a ballet dance. After so much time invested into making the film, with having to drive from set to set in a van, Stallone buying his dog back but having to pay $15,000 to the guy he sold it to for $25, that greedy bastard whoever he was, and supposedly offering people free chicken to whoever came to be the stand-in crowd for the film's big fight scene, the film finally started to be screened in cinemas in 1976. The test screening at the Directors Guild was apparently terrible at first, but surprisingly did lead to a positive reception. As quoted by Stallone, the laughs weren't coming in when they were supposed to, the fight scenes seemed to be listless, as the response was, and I just sat there as everyone left the theatre, and I couldn't believe it. I really blew it. I was humiliated and saddened by it. So I walked down 3 flights of stairs out of the theatre, and everyone from the theatre was standing there waiting for me. And they started to applaud. I mean truly applaud. I'll never experience a moment like that again. As time went on, more and more people started to recognise the film, and it quickly gained high praise, grossing over $200 million at the box office and making it all the way to the 1977 Oscars. Nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role with Stallone as Rocky, Best Actor in a Supporting Role with Burgess Meredith as Mickey and Burt Young as Paulie, Best Actress in a Leading Role with Talia Shire as Adrian, Best Original Song in a Film with Gonna Fly Now by the film's composer Bill Conti, Best Sound Design by Harry Warren Tetrick, William McCaughey, Lyle Burbridge and Bud Alper, and Best... oh Christ, this is going to be a mouthful, isn't it? Best Screenplay written directly for the screen based on factual material or on story material not previously published or produced. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Written, as we know, by Sylvester Stallone. And it won Best Direction by John G. Avildsen, Best Film Editing by Richard Hazley and Scott Conrad, and most famously, Best Picture of 1976, with the award going to producers Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff, who even insisted Stallone come up on stage with them to accept the award.
Sylvester Stallone, I'd like to thank you for sharing your dream of Rocky with us, and for giving a performance that has enriched all our lives. I'd like to thank John Avildsen for his sensitive direction, Gene Kirkwood for his imagination and energy, and finally, the Academy, who was permitted Rocky, 1,000,000-to-1 underdog, go the distance tonight. Thank you very much.
There were many people behind the scenes that helped us really achieve our dream. Arthur Krim, Eric Pleskow, Mike Medavoy, and Gabe Sumner at United Artists all were very, very responsible for us being here today. They really helped all of us live out the dream of Rocky.
And to all the Rockies in the world, I love you.
However, it wasn't all good news. Later on, Chuck Wepner apparently filed a lawsuit in 2003 for not getting paid as he was supposedly promised, as it was heavily inspired by his fight, even though the case itself, as far as I'm aware, didn't really progress. Given that Wepner was reportedly a dirty fighter during his bouts with Ali, I doubt the lawsuit affected the film that much. There was also some mentions of the scenes when Rocky punches meat at a factory, which is what professional boxer Joe Frazier famously used to train, and only got paid for a small cameo appearing as himself at the event of the film's final fight. Whether or not there was any controversy around this, I can't find it anywhere, so I'll just put it down as a harmless reference. At least Muhammad Ali was slightly friendlier about the film's existence, and joked around with Stallone at the 1977 Oscars when Stallone gave the announcements for Best Supporting Actress.
Not anyone else, but I really feel it's a privilege to be here tonight, and I'm gonna try my best to, but... Can't you see I'm working?
I'm the real Apollo Creed. You stole my script. You stole my script.
Don't you see I'm working here?
No, I saw it. I watched your movie. You stole my script. All that was me. I'm the Apollo Creed.
You've been putting me on for
No,
years.
show me what you can really do. Show me what you can really do.
You know my real name, don't you?
No, show me.
Kid Salami.
Show me what you can do. No. Come on, show me. Show me.
With so much hard work paying off in the end, Rocky has gone down in history as one of the greatest inspirational films of all time, with heavy themes of motivation and the engaging story of an everyday nobody rising to the occasion in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So how did it tell that story so well? Well, Rocky is a film about boxing, but it's not a boxing film. To explain what I mean, I'll first give a quick summary of the plot to start off this review proper. Rocky Balboa is a poor, struggling boxer in Philadelphia, fighting in local bars who charge him so much for using their equipment that he basically makes the bare minimum penny change out of the fights. And he's also told he's a pathetic fighter constantly by the crowds, with constant verbal insults thrown at him by the owner of the local boxing gym, Mickey, and only being able to make money in a dangerous job of working as a thumb breaker for a loan shark. It's very clear he's down on his luck. All the while, heavyweight champion of the world Apollo Creed is set to fight a professional boxer in Philadelphia, until said boxer sustains a terrible injury to his left hand and no other professional fighter is willing to step in as a replacement. Apollo comes up with the idea of giving a local, unknown Philadelphia boxer a shot at the title for the sake of publicity and audience engagement. Which is why he picks Rocky purely on his nickname inside the ring, the Italian Stallion. Either that's just a cheeky reference, or who knows, maybe the party at the Kitty and Studs is part of the Stallone cinematic universe. I can't go along with this shit. So it seems pretty simple, right? Our poor and struggling protagonist is given a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and so the rest of the film is going to focus on their journey to said challenge, right? Kind of. Like I said, the boxing aspect to this film is more of a tool that's used to tell the story, rather than the story itself being around boxing, if that makes sense. Let's compare this to other films where our protagonist is given a call to action, as it were. Poe in Kung Fu Panda, Harry Potter in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Neo in The Matrix, and Peter Parker in 2002's Spider-Man. What these films do different to Rocky is have the call to action be within the first few minutes. Poe is chosen as the Dragon Warrior, Harry sets out with Hagrid to Hogwarts for the first time, Neo is unplugged from the Matrix, and Peter Parker is bitten by the radioactive spider within the first third of the film to meet the 3-act structure most common in story writing: the equilibrium, the disequilibrium, and the new equilibrium. Not that that's a bad thing, the 3-act structure is common in storytelling for a reason, because it works so well. But the story we see them go through focuses on the aftermath of the call to action, so the film's genre gets pushed to the forefront, while the themes are left as something you need to pause and take a deeper look to find. Rocky does something different. You can classify the call to action as when Rocky goes to Jurgens' office after hearing from Mickey that he's looking for sparring partners for Apollo, only to find out that he wants him to fight Apollo for the title.
Would you be interested in fighting Apollo Creed for the World Heavyweight Championship?
A story beat that, I kid you not, takes place just under halfway into this near 2-hour story. This might seem like a red flag going in if you're so used to the 3-act structure, but fear not, mate. Instead of dragging out an origin story of the protagonist beyond an organic lifespan, Rocky uses that extra time to develop the characters before the call to action. We spend more time with Rocky to fully understand who he is as a person, not as a boxer. That way, the call to action feels more fulfilling, because we've taken the time to watch how he communicates with people and how his life has slightly changed in that time, which I'm saving for when I talk about a very specific character later on. What's more, Rocky says the most unexpected thing to Jurgens that separates him from other protagonists in stories. When asked if he would be interested in fighting Apollo, even if we know his life would absolutely benefit from such a change, he says,
No.
He doesn't think he's right for Apollo to fight in a professional bout. He was perfectly fine just to be a sparring partner to Apollo, but to turn down an even greater opportunity with a much more substantial reward to possibly gain from, it really takes you aback. Even though he does say yes, though not directly shown on screen, this becomes a vital part into his training for the fight later on. That no that he gives to Jurgens would have not hit as hard had we not spent the first half of the film with Rocky to get to know him. Which, I think, is the perfect segue into the next subject of this review.
The more I thought about this kind of street-like character that just is totally misrepresented by the way he looks physically. Just the way he walks down the street was enough to say people, oh, dismiss him. He's kind of looks like a bully or looks like a dark kind of character. And I thought, that's an interesting character because they're always unrealized.
Rocky's character in the first film and subsequently the rest of the films is best described as never judging a book by its cover. A common trope used in many different fictional stories. It can be an effective way to engage an audience with a specific character because you're not looking at them based on what they're wearing, how their face looks, or what they are doing, but by who they are inside. But, if done incorrectly, the moral of the story can be too obvious and spout out to the audience, which is a very easy trap for writers to fall into. Thus, you lose that quality and subtlety to your film if you don't take things carefully. Rocky thankfully stays clear of this trap and tells us exactly how we should view his character in a subtle way with its opening scene. The first 10 minutes of this film sells us on who our protagonist is, what he wants, and his true nature. We open with a shot that slowly reveals to us a boxing fight in a local club. It's grimy, muted in the colours, and there is rubbish being thrown into the ring by the crowd watching, who are kept in the shadows as the only source of light is shone over the boxing ring, where the fight is our main focus. As the fight goes on, we, the audience, are viewing this just like a member of the crowd, just a spectator that doesn't really side with any specific fighter. The crowd themselves are hurling insults at the two fighters while also booing them. So combined with the rubbish they're throwing, it's made clear that these two fighters are not well represented and deemed as unprofessional. Then as the bell rings and the round is over, the fighters go back to their corners to rest, and we go inside the ring as the camera is now focused on Rocky. The man in his corner says he fights like a bum, but Rocky pays no attention, simply asking for water and his mouthguard, and says to the man placing a bet on him that he'll win the fight. So when the next round starts, the perspective is different. We not only have someone who we're rooting for in this fight, but we see that he has a will to win despite taking one hell of an unpleasant beating. Made even worse when his opponent, Spider Rico, makes a dirty move and headbutts him in the face. We barely know Rocky at this point of the film, and we're already really rooting for him to win this fight, which, despite the fact that he does, he still makes a dirty move back, punching him when he's down, and the crowd still don't like him.
Bum. You're a bum! You know that? You're a bum!
In the locker rooms, he and Spider Rico each take a moment to catch their breath after the brawl, as the owner gives them their earned money for the fight, which is severely cut down by expenses paid for using the shower and locker as well as tax. So Rocky barely earns over $40, making that brutal clobbering we just saw him take felt like it was almost not worth it for such a low amount of money. This guy has to be desperate in order to be doing all of that just for $40, especially since he immediately asks when the next fight is.
When do I fight again?
Maybe 2 weeks. Give me a call.
With the fight over, Rocky walks home through the night streets of Philadelphia as the opening credits play. Take note of how he's dressed and the way that he walks. He's dressed in nearly all black with his dark jeans and shoes, with a fedora and a leather jacket. Walking with a gangster-like stride, bouncing a rubber ball used to practice his reflexes. This is the first time we're seeing his character out of the club he was just boxing in, and we're led to believe just by his appearance and the way that he moves, that he's a rough, tough man from the streets who shouldn't be messed with. Only for him to immediately stop outside a pet shop to look at the puppies. Not only establishing a location he's going to visit tomorrow, but straight away tells the audience that underneath his gruff exterior, there's a gentle giant. He crosses the street, passing by what will also be established later as the gym that he goes to train. He passes a group of people standing on a street corner around a bin fire, singing with each other. One of these people, by the way, is played by Sylvester's brother, Frank Stallone. Their situation seems dour as they're huddled around what we can assume is their only source of heat, given they're out on the streets at night. But there's almost a sense of warmth in the way that they're singing with each other. Almost like they're not letting being out in the cold dampen their spirits.
Take it back, do-do-do-do, take it back, do-do-do. I said I've been told by do-do-do-do some people and they all said take it back, do-do-do-do, take it back like before.
They're also friendly to Rocky as he walks by, complimenting them on their singing. So we know Rocky has some level of respect in the neighbourhood, despite people in the club beforehand calling him a bum. We follow Rocky down the streets as the opening credits finish. As we finally see where he lives, it's now all too clear why Rocky does what he does. This man is in a poor household, with a colour scheme matching the dull and dirty club he was fighting in, almost like those dark colours are following him throughout his life. He tries to brighten his mood by talking to his pet turtles and goldfish in a upbeat manner. So now it's even clearer that this scene with him stopping outside the pet store wasn't just to show that he's a softie, but that he's been there before and most likely still goes there for turtle food as he practices speaking in the mirror.
And this turtle food I got here, this turtle food I got here had more flies in it, no more moss in it than flies. More fly, more moss than who the hell cares?
Rocky grabs a photo of who is presumably himself when he was a kid. As he looks back and forth between the photo and himself, without saying a word, we can see that Rocky is not happy at all with where he is in his life right now. And as the scene comes to a close with him lying down on his bed, holding ice cubes against the scar left by Spider Rico's headbutt, we finally understand who is Rocky. He's a tough and explosive boxer, desperate to compete in the most bottom-of-the-barrel fight clubs with unprofessional fighters for low money. Scary looking on the outside, but a friendly, gentle giant on the inside. He's an optimist when it comes to winning fights and talking to his pets to cheer him up, but he's also a realist, knowing despite his efforts, no matter how hard he tries, he's still stuck in a lowest of the low apartment, barely making any money and has barely any respect from anybody. Deep underneath that optimism, he is miserable. So, in the first 10 minutes, we already know who our protagonist is, what he wants, and his true nature. And we're going to spend a lot more time with him not just to see how he interacts with the other characters of the film, but to learn more about who he is and what he stands for. One of these scenes is when we see him in his job outside of the ring, and just like his boxing career, this job is dangerous and requires him to be tough and intimidating. He works as a collector for Gazzo, a loan shark in the local area that, if he doesn't get his borrowed money back, he sends someone to teach them a brutal lesson. Rocky chases down a construction worker named Bob late on his money, cornering him as he begs him not to break his thumbs. And despite what we're all thinking, Rocky just lets him pay wherever he can and lets him get off scot-free. Even though it results in him getting a stern word from Gazzo, he still stands by what he did. It's like he knows what he has to do in order to earn his wages from his boss, but he still has morals that he sticks by, even if it also results in the driver taking the piss out of him.
So long, meatbag.
The scene where he best displays where his morals lie comes in a later scene when he's walking home and sees a little girl he refers to as Little Marie, thereby establishing that he knows her family and rightfully tries to talk her out of hanging around with who he calls creeps on the street. What follows is a long conversation as he walks her to her house, telling her that if she keeps living with no self-respect, she'll get no respect from others, as they would just, in Rocky's own words, remember her as a smokeaholic whore. The conversation is not only emphasised in length with the long shots as they walk down the road, but feels genuine with the actuality in the dialogue of this film. What do I mean by actuality? Basically, when writing a conversation between two characters, there's a pattern, one that's most common in the first drafts when it comes to dialogue. That being, character 1 says something, pause, character 2 gives their answer, pause, character 1 says something else in response, pause, character 2 responds, lather, rinse, repeat until you have a full conversation scene. Which, let's be honest, that's just not how people communicate in real life. In conversations, we stammer and repeat ourselves as we could be piecing together the sentences as we say them. We also sometimes talk over each other if we want to get our point across before the other person can finish their sentence. Adding that sense of actuality to the dialogue by having scenes where characters mutter, stammer and talk over each other makes them feel more real because they're talking like people and not like computers. Even if the sound mixing for this scene, and the rest of the film for that matter, is a bit rough around the edges. And because the conversation feels so genuine, it feels more like Rocky isn't just talking to Marie, but the audience watching. It'd be very easy to have Rocky do a very cheesy turn to the camera and break the fourth wall, or he could give this speech to Marie without any establishment that this is something he would naturally tell someone, which would make the speech feel forced. But the film has established he does like to look out for others, and perhaps he's not only venting out at Marie, hoping she'll grow to be a better person, but perhaps also venting everything that he said to himself for the last few years. The scene in the beginning when he's looking between the photo of himself as a kid and his reflection in the mirror, he's probably saying everything in his head that he says to Marie, only 10 times more harshly.
20 years from now, people are going to say, hey, you remember Marie? No, who's she? She's the little whore that hung down the atomic hoagie shop. Oh yeah, now I remember her. You see, they don't remember you, they remember the rep. You understand?
But despite that, she still doesn't listen to him after she gets home.
Hey, Rocky.
Yo.
Screw you, creepo.
We now understand that Rocky is a guy with a lot of knowledge and advice many people can benefit from, and a desire to pass on that advice. But the problem is, every character we see him interact with keeps putting him down, reminding him of his position and telling him to just give up before he even begins. Those characters I will discuss in just a moment, but there is one that I have to talk about next who brings a completely different energy to the rest of the people in Rocky's life. In a town where even though a couple of people like him, the rest of the people treat him like scum, an idiot, or the brute he looks like on the outside, one person treats him in a different light. One special person who is, without a doubt, the gentle yet powerful heart in the story of Rocky. Adrian.
Talia Shire was also a last-minute choice because we just couldn't find the right person, and then she came in, and we just read, and I felt the earth move. I really felt a tremendous vitality and kinship. I mean, I loved her. I really, really loved her. I just loved the way she looked and the way her hair fell, and this timid, fragile creature. I said, it was just incredible, and the perfect voice.
Stallone has gone on record to say that Rocky is not a boxing story, but instead a love story. Something you can tell with how they handled the woman who becomes the love of Rocky's life, Adrian. We first meet her when Rocky comes to buy turtle food from the pet store where she works, a place established earlier that Rocky goes to often. Now we understand why. We also understand why he was talking to himself in the mirror. He was practicing a joke to impress her.
You know, the last turtle food I got here had more moss in it than flies. You know that, Adrian? And these moths, they get caught in the turtle's throat right about here in his paws, right? I gotta smack them on the back of the shell, and what do you think they get? Huh? And they get what? Huh? Go what? Show shot. You get show shot.
A joke she does indeed find funny, evident by her smile, but is too shy to laugh or react out loud, solidifying the kind of person she is at this point in the film. Adrian is a massive introvert, wrapped in coats, hats and hiding behind her glasses, which I guess you can maybe say is the use of the cinema cliche where a shy woman takes off her glasses and suddenly she's hot, but I disagree for one solid reason. Rocky thought she was beautiful even before she stopped wearing glasses. Instead of a story where a guy falls for a girl because he thinks she's hot, Rocky sees something beautiful inside of Adrian that she is just way too nervous to let out. We already have the audience stand-in character for the never judging by appearances with Rocky himself. Now he's the one not judging a book by its cover with Adrian. We know that he feels unseen and looked down upon by people around him, and that's the same way Adrian is feeling. Not only being vulgarly insulted by people she's never met before like Gazzo's driver.
Hey, she's retarded.
She ain't retarded, she's shy, you know?
But also by her own brother who was also Rocky's friend, Paulie.
Sometimes she gets me so crazy, I could split her head with a razor.
Yeah, he's a tricky one. I'll come back to him. Even though Rocky is also incredibly shy as he constantly stutters and repeats himself asking if Adrian would like to hang out, Adrian is already just too wrapped up in a metaphorical coat of social anxiety. It's not that she doesn't trust Rocky, he made it clear over and over that he'd look out for her. It's just breaking past that barrier she set up for herself feels impossible. However, a chance finally arrives when Paulie says to come round to his and Adrian's house on Thanksgiving to take her out, even if he lies to Rocky, falsely reassuring him that Adrian is okay with it. On the night of Thanksgiving, Rocky comes round and is, surprise surprise, unexpected to Adrian. Anxiety takes over her body, she and Paulie argue, and she locks herself in her room. Rocky doesn't want Adrian being uncomfortable, so he's ready to leave her alone there and then and head home. But Paulie encourages him to have one last shot at asking her out. Rocky is incredibly nervous, knocking on her door and just casually speaking to her. Again, stark contrast to his general appearance, making this scene that much more adorable, as well as kind of humorous with jokey lines like this.
Yo, Adrian, it's me, Rocky. Rocky, you know? Listen, I don't know what to say, because I ain't never talked to no door before, you know?
Finally, Rocky is able to convince her and she's dressed up ready to go. And right as she and Rocky are about to leave, there's one moment that completely went over my head when I watched it ages ago that I think is such a powerful little detail, and it's right here. Adrian looks at herself in the mirror. She's doing exactly what Rocky did at the start of the film. Both are looking at their reflections and seeing who they are on the inside, but for different reasons. When Rocky looks at himself, he's about to treat his wounds from the fight and lie down to do nothing. He's feeling shit about himself after making a huge effort towards something and barely reaping the rewards from it. When Adrian does it, it's before she's about to take what is possibly one of the biggest steps she's taken in her life by simply going on a date. She's feeling dreadfully nervous about making a huge effort towards this, so is looking in the mirror for reassurance that she'll be okay. Two very different scenes of looking in the mirror where each person is looking at who they are underneath. Such an effective and narratively satisfying parallel. Rocky takes her to the ice rink, only to find that they're closed for Thanksgiving. However, he manages to buy his way into having 10 minutes on the ice, so Adrian gets on some skates while Rocky jogs alongside her. It's a naturally very awkward date, not just with the 10-minute timer from the owner, but Adrian is still incredibly shy. So Rocky starts talking to her about his life and how when it comes to boxing, he's a southpaw, a fighter who is left-handed. It should be noted that while Rocky is doing most of the talking in this scene, he's not doing it to talk over Adrian. but is doing so until Adrian feels comfortable speaking herself, which he is constantly reassuring if she is feeling okay, catching her when she falls over, joking about how one of his fingers has a permanent wound, and making sure he's not too loud.
Am I talking too loud?
3 minutes!
Which eventually does work. He tells her that his father told him he wasn't very smart, so he should develop his muscles and body, and Adrian shares with him that her mother said the opposite thing to her, that she didn't have much of a body so she should develop her brain. And right there, right when she first opens up to him, right when they're starting to get into a conversation, their time on the ice runs out. Such a brilliantly put together scene. A way of Rocky talking with Adrian until she feels safe to come out of her shell, while doing something that isn't just walking and talking so it keeps the audience interested. They head out and walk through the night street, and Rocky invites her into his apartment. Adrian still has a lot of nerves fighting against her from doing so, which is why Rocky constantly keeps joking around to appear as endearing as possible. He knows his appearance is intimidating, so he acts like a goof to counteract that, making her feel safe.
Come on in.
No, I gotta go.
Well, I gotta go too. I gotta go to the bathroom. Come on.
Finally deciding to take a chance, Adrian steps in, and what follows from this is a controversial scene, to say the least. It starts with Rocky remembering when he bought his turtles from the pet shop on Adrian's first day working there, making a joke when Adrian asks to call her brother, but Rocky doesn't have a phone, so he jokingly yells out of the window as if he's talking to Paulie.
Yo, Paulie, your sister's with me. I'll call you back later. See ya.
But it seems he just can't get Adrian to fully relax. Then she says she doesn't feel comfortable and goes to the door, but Rocky prevents her from leaving. I'm going to make a statement for both sides of how this scene can be viewed, and then say which side I agree with the most. On the one hand, yes, this can be seen as a guy forcing himself upon a woman when she said she doesn't feel comfortable, cornering her, keeping the door shut, and given how shy we've seen Adrian behave, she may not have the confidence to fight her way out of this. You'd think a guy like Rocky would respect the boundaries and let her leave, given how much of the night he spent trying to make her feel as comfortable as possible. But I get it. The image of a big burly boxer preventing an innocent looking woman from leaving his apartment, on the surface, is definitely a red flag. But, and please hear me out on this, there are subtle little moments provided by the writing and the phenomenal acting from Sylvester and Talia that sells this as a gentle, wholesome scene where you really see them fall in love for the first time. The first being Rocky's voice. Throughout this film, we've already seen Rocky speak quietly and laid back to others, only ever getting annoyed at people like Paulie who say mean things about him or Adrian, or just raising his voice at people like Gazzo's driver.
I should have broke your thumbs!
In this scene, Rocky talks for the first time in whispers. He's brought himself down to the quietest, most soothing voice he can muster, and while it is slightly hard to hear what he is saying as a result of the sound mixing being a little bit off, you still understand why he is doing this. To further reassure to Adrian that despite his image, he has a friendly, gentle side that would not do anything to bring her harm, all shown with his voice. The moments where he takes her glasses off and her hat as slowly as possible, a metaphor for her finally letting her guard down and trusting someone else. Adrian looking down as her nerves are still fighting against her, but gives little glances into Rocky's eyes because she now sees the peaceful soul inside of him and wants to keep looking, with Rocky giving little compliments as he removes her glasses and hat.
You had nice eyes, you know. I always knew you was pretty.
Don't tease me.
I'm not teasing you.
Which finally leads to Rocky saying this.
I want to kiss you. You don't have to kiss me back if you don't want. I want to kiss you.
Still very slowly, he leans in to kiss her neck, then on the lips. Gradually, but so naturally, Adrian finally lets go of the fear that's been holding her back for so long, and the two embrace. From this moment on, they've solidified a bond that will remain unbroken for the rest of time, because they found in each other what they were looking for. Adrian has found someone to appreciate her for who she is and protect her from harm, and Rocky has found someone to care for, whose mere presence will keep him going through however shit his life may be right now. I'm just going to say this now, this does not give you the right as either a man or a woman to force someone into being intimate with you for the sake of your own selfish desires. This was the 70s when this film was written after all, and this scene only works here because it was made clear enough to the audience that Adrian does have feelings of intimacy for Rocky, and that Rocky is the kind of person who would not take advantage of Adrian whatsoever. Consent is a must, and I feel I have to get that point across to anybody who takes this video the wrong way. I cannot emphasise enough from before how much I love that this character journey takes place before the call to action of Rocky receiving the invitation to fight Apollo. It wasn't the fight for the biggest title in the world that brought them together, it was each other, and it still continues to grow over the course of the rest of the film. Rocky now having a soulmate to comfort him after his hard days of training, despite what Mickey says.
Women weaken legs.
And Adrian starts to gain more confidence in how she dresses, how she starts to go out in public to places other than the pet store by surprising him at his house with Buttkiss, the dog, and standing up to Paulie a lot more often.
Without such good people around to help, you don't have such a good chance.
Einstein flunked out of school twice.
That's
Yeah. Beethoven was deaf. Helen Keller was blind. I think Rocky's got a good chance.
A newfound belief in herself gained thanks to Rocky helping her past her barriers. All culminating in one big scene where she and Rocky are sat watching TV together in her and Paulie's house, talking negatively about him without realising he just got back. In a drunken, mad rage, Paulie grabs a baseball bat and starts breaking things in the living room, ranting about how Adrian has made his life a living hell.
I'm a pig. A pig gets you the best. You're like a loser. I don't get married because of you. You can't live by yourself. I put you through together and you. Don't you forget it. You owe me.
All these insults piling and piling on top of another until she finally lets her inner voice out and snaps at him.
You owe me.
Why do I owe you?
You're supposed to be good to me.
Why do I owe you, Paulie? Why do I owe you? I treat you good. I cook for you. I clean for you. I pick up your dirty clothes. I take care of you, Paulie. I don't owe you nothing. And you made me feel like a loser. I'm not a loser.
You're busted.
In a film where the finale has two fighters throwing punches hard enough to break noses, cause swollen eyes and break ribs, this scene emotionally hits harder than any punch thrown by any fighter in this film. And that's a good thing, because we've seen this confidence from Adrian grow over the course of the story, thanks to Rocky helping her to see it in herself. A calibre above just having a generic love interest be basic support on the sidelines of the fight, but a struggling, emotionally responsive woman that Rocky has helped as much as she has helped him. They wrote her as a person, not a staged character. That is what makes her the heart of this story. I want to take this time to talk about the supporting characters that, while they don't carry the emotional heart to the film that Adrian does, they are still important to the story, each being written as heavily flawed characters but still have a good nature heart.
Yeah, come on. You want to hit on me? Come on. I'll break both your arms so they don't work for you.
Sort of. As well as impacting Rocky's life for different reasons. Let's start with his manager/trainer, Mickey.
I said that before, you dumb dago.
Mickey is your typical wise old trainer with a grouchy demeanour. When we first meet him, we just discovered that Rocky had his gear taken out of his locker and thrown into a bag, and when Rocky questions him about it, he just shrugs him off, preferring to train other people and constantly insults him, believing him not to be a real fighter.
You got heart, but you fight like a goddamn ape. Nothing special about you. You never got your nose busted. Well, leave it that way, and I should put in what's left of your mind.
We, the audience, could already gather Rocky wasn't the best at fighting given his unprofessional fight in the opening, but hearing it said out loud makes us feel really sorry for him. When we next see Rocky visit the gym, Mickey tells him about how someone came looking for him asking if he wanted to be a sparring partner. but doesn't miss a chance to insult him.
They'll probably look for sparring partners for Creed, you know?
I said that before, you dumb dago!
Rocky, this time full of a newfound confidence, presumably since he just got together with Adrian in the last scene, finally loses his rag and yells at Mickey to tell him why he keeps talking shit to him, unaware he's just about to be given an even harsher response.
You know, I've been coming in for 6 years, and 6 years you've been sticking it to me. I want to know how come.
You don't want to know.
Yeah, I want to know how come.
You want to know?
I want to know how!
Okay, I'm going to tell you. Because you had the talent to become a good fighter. And instead of that, you became a leg breaker. Some cheap, second-rate loan shark.
It's a living?
It's a waste of life.
Mickey didn't help Rocky with proper training because he chose to turn down a wasteful path in his life. This argument has two flawed perspectives where each side is both right and wrong for their own reasons. Mickey was just as wrong for leaving Rocky to fend for himself as Rocky was for getting involved with loan sharks, but Rocky was just as right to say Mickey never gave him a chance as Mickey was right to point out Rocky still got involved with a scummy job regardless. Going against the black and white argument of one side clearly in the right and one side clearly in the wrong, and throwing some grey spots in there to get the audience thinking. Carried on when Mickey comes to Rocky's apartment after he's announced on TV to be fighting Apollo. He's acting very differently around Rocky this time, very jokey and much more friendly to him than he was before, joking about his turtles making good soup, and seeing a poster of Rocky Marciano, a famous real-life boxer who had died back in 1969, who Rocky's name and fighting style in the film was named after. He too also fought Muhammad Ali in a fictional boxing fight called The Super Fight, a scripted fight calculated by several boxing professionals. Your first thought is Mickey's only in this for the money. He's only in this because now Rocky is going to be worth something and he wants a piece of it. But then Mickey starts to get heartfelt and serious, talking about the boxing fights he had in his day and how in one fight one of his opponents hid nails in his glove and punched holes in the side of his mouth, saying the reason he never made it into the big leagues was because he didn't have a manager. That he's an old man wiled away from his prime but has so much knowledge he never got to display in front of people and wants to pass it on. Rocky is still frustrated with him for not giving him a second thought when he came to Mickey 10 years ago for help. Once again, both sides are right and wrong in their own way. It was too coincidental for Mickey to only offer this help when he's in with a once-in-a-lifetime shot at the title, and Rocky was right to call him out on it. But at the same time, Rocky is not going to get anywhere without Mickey's knowledge if he wants to survive in the ring. It ends with Rocky shutting the door on Mickey's face, almost as a parallel to how he felt Mickey did to him years ago, as Mickey sighs and leaves. As he walks out, he hears the full extent of Rocky's frustration ranting out at him. We understand that this is rage built up over 10 years that he needed to get out of his system, but we, as well as Rocky, both understand that now what he needs is the guidance from Mickey. So with all that weight off his shoulders, he runs down the street and forgives Mickey. You don't hear what they say as they are far off in the distance, but you know exactly that they've made amends and are ready to start training. Throughout the rest of the film, Mickey takes the role of a grumpy but well-meaning father figure to Rocky, not letting him get distracted by people asking for his autograph or fooling around with Adrian, teaching him how to keep balance while fighting by practicing with the string tied around his feet, and egging him on to do his best, giving him the verbal ego boost he was missing before.
Okay, now when you walk into the ring with the #1 heavyweight of the world, you'll be ready, won't you? Why? Because I waited for 50 years to make you ready. You'll be able to spit nails, kid. Like the guy says, you're gonna eat lightning and you're gonna crap thunder.
A rough, tough character with a lot of heart to him. I'm really glad they veered away from his character being written as a racist, because then the audience would really be struggling to find him endearing the way they do now.
Want me to get you a beer, Paulie?
Hey, you looking to do a good deed? Keep out of my freaking life!
Paulie is a very unlikable person. so unlikable to a point where even we wonder why he's still a friend to Rocky and remains to be so throughout the rest of the films. And if I'm honest, I struggle to see that sometimes too. But I'm going to do my best to explain why. So, he's an alcoholic lower class worker at the Shamrock's meat factory, the same place where Rocky gains the idea to start punching the raw meat as a way to train after Paulie frustrates him. Throughout the course of the film, we see Paulie insist upon Rocky to get him a job with Guzzo as part of his loan shark business, with Rocky always refusing. And we see his verbally and sometimes physically abusive behaviour towards his sister Adrian, showcased when he is at his most violent when Paulie has his baseball bat outburst at the two of them that I mentioned earlier. So why of all people does Rocky choose to be associated with a guy like Paulie, you ask? Well, here's what I think. We see that Rocky keeps Paulie away from being involved with the same deadbeat dangerous job he has so that Paulie doesn't become like him. Paulie has the ambition to get out of his job because it's always so cold in the factory, and while he doesn't realise he'd be stepping into a worse job if he went to work for Guzzo, you can understand part of his frustration for Rocky always turning him down, as well as his alcoholism. What's more, how he's egging on Rocky to take Adrian out on a date when he visits the house, almost like he wants the best for her. However, while I'm saying he is understandable, that does not justify his bad behaviour in any means. Even though we know Rocky is the kind of person who sees the best in others, we struggle to see what Rocky sees in Paulie that's worth him staying around. Yes, he may have encouraged Rocky to ask Adrian out because he knew he liked her. Yes, he may help Rocky off with his gloves one time. And yes, he may get some news people invited down to his factory to interview Rocky during his training. But everything else makes him seem like a prick. But there will be one subtle little moment later on in the film's climax that will truly show his good side. We'll get there.
So why don't you break his thumb like I told you to? When you don't do what I tell you to do, you make me look bad, Rock.
Guzzo is definitely the smallest side character in this film with the least screen time compared to the others. He has even less of a presence in Rocky 2 before disappearing altogether from Rocky 3 onwards. But he does have his little moments that I think make him a character worth talking about in this film. We first see Guzzo when Rocky visits him to drop off the money he collected from Bob, and when we do, he comes off as a very generic mob boss, scolding Rocky for letting Bob get off without collecting the amount he asked for.
I figure if I break the guy's thumb, he gets laid off, right? He can't make
Yeah, well,
no
don't
money,
figure. Let me do the
out.
figuring, okay, Rock? From here on, just let me do the figuring. You know, these guys think that we're running some kind of charity or something. They're gonna get a fight. From here on in, do what I tell you to do because it's bad for my reputation. You understand? You got it, Rock?
I got it.
Straight away, we don't like him, as we're not supposed to. But it's what they do with him after his appearance that fleshes him out to be a decent guy at his centre. When Rocky talks about his up-and-coming date with Adrian, he and Guzzo's driver nearly get into a fight when the driver says she's retarded. While Guzzo gets annoyed at both of them for shouting in both his ears, he gives Rocky $50 for his date and says to have a nice night out with her. Then later on, after Rocky is announced to be fighting Apollo, he meets up with him, gives him $500 for training expenses, and says he'll come to watch his fight, which he does, selling us entirely on who his character is by saying this.
You know, you ain't never had any luck. But I think this time Lady Luck may be in your corner. What do you think?
Maybe. Hey, thanks for the money, Tom, you know?
It's okay, don't worry about
Thanks
it.
a lot.
See you, all right? Hey, wait a minute.
What?
You're in training, huh? Come on.
Hey.
This humanises who we once thought to be a standard unlikable gangster. Stallone could have easily stuck to this one-dimensional trait of writing Guzzo as a typical, intimidating figure, but no. Guzzo may be part of a rough scumbag business, but that doesn't mean he's not aware of it. While he does get frustrated at Rocky for not doing his job properly, he understands why he'd take a chance to get out of that job. He's not an idiot. With the knowledge from the audience that Rocky has potentially been involved with Guzzo's line of work for 10 years, as that's when Mickey rejected him, we can assume that Guzzo sort of fathered him in a way, making sure he's fit and healthy by taking away his cigarette and supporting him on the day of his fight.
You are a bad guy, but this does not mean you're a bad guy.
Thanks, Zangief. One of the many tricks done to make smaller characters feel larger in their role in the story.
I get hold of every worthwhile contender, and they all say the same thing. 5 weeks just isn't enough time to get into shape.
Oh, shape nothing, man. They're afraid.
Hell, they know everybody in the world's gonna see this fight and none of them got a prayer whipping me. So they're making excuses so they don't have to be the chump to get whipped in front of the whole civilized world.
I've listed Apollo Creed as a side character because while he obviously carries a heavy significance as the heavyweight champion opponent that Rocky is fighting, we don't actually see much of him in the film. But that was intentional. Apollo is kept out of the vast majority of the film until the fight because his ambitions and ideology are quick and easy to grasp to make him a developed character. We first see him as the confident fighter who loves the media and gives out inspiration to people at home watching. When his soon-to-be opponent Mac Lee Green pulls out because of injuring his left hand, and no other ranked fighter is willing to take his spot, Apollo is not frustrated because he doesn't get to fight anyone, but because he won't get to put on a show he wants his audience to see. So he comes up with the idea of choosing an underdog fighter to be given the chance to fight him, a way to both put on a spectacle for their audience and bring in those big numbers.
Apollo, I like it. It's very American.
No, Juggins. It's very smart.
Said chance arrives when they look through a list of local fighters and Apollo chooses Rocky purely on his ring name, the Italian Stallion, despite warnings from his trainer Tony Duke not to mess with a southpaw because of a so-called southpaw jinx, and him saying he should take Rocky seriously when he sees him punching the meat on TV. Apollo shrugs it off, completely sold on the idea of just using the name for publicity.
He's a southpaw. I don't want you messing around with southpaws. Now, you do everything backwards.
Southpaw nothing. I've dropped him in 3. Apollo Creed meets the Italian Stallion. Sounds like a damn monster movie.
While he's far from a bad person at his core and is definitely not doing this for the greed of money, but more so to give a great show for people to witness, you can tell he's not taking this as seriously as someone like Rocky is. For Rocky, it's a life-changing moment that is one hell of an obstacle for him to overcome. For Apollo, it's just another Sunday. In no time at all, we are sold on who is Apollo Creed and what he represents for the film. While he is the challenge our protagonist has to overcome in his soon-to-be moment in the sun, wanting to give an exciting display to the crowds is not necessarily a villainous character trait. He's not antagonistic or bloodthirsty, he's a showman of the people. His confidence is admirable, but his humbleness leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to fighting. But before we can get to the fight itself, we have one iconic scene to look at that has influenced many films both that are about sports or use sports as a method to tell a story, and that is the training montage. This is it. One of, if not the most remembered factor of this film. The one and only training montage of Rocky. For the few who don't know specifically what this means, a montage is a collection of shots that take place over a length of time passing by. In the case of storytelling, it's used to display a character's gradual growth in the skill they're trying to master before the big event. A trope that has been copied, adapted, and parodied by several future forms of film and storytelling. In the context of this training montage, we're seeing Rocky starting to put his all into his training before the fight with Apollo, which is right around the corner. We've spent time getting to know the characters, we've spent time establishing the significance of the main event, now it's time to see just how prepared Rocky is, and he is putting in 110%. Starting off with a slow jog through the streets, similar to the first jog he took earlier on in the film where he was exhausted and struggling for breath by the time he made it to the steps of the Museum of Philadelphia, showing he was clearly yet to get into proper shape. The jog here is very similar to that. He's not going very fast and already looks equally tired, but still carries on not letting things distract him like a random guy throwing an orange at him. Which was unscripted, by the way, as nobody there knew who Stallone was or what he was being filmed for. We then cut to various shots of Rocky's exercising with punching the speed bag, press-ups, getting hit in the gut, sit-ups, and of course punching the raw meat. All with either minimal or no sound to let the training speak for itself and the music to amplify what's going on. The iconic song Gonna Fly Now has been embedded into the minds of everyone. It's become so memorable you don't even need to have seen the Rocky films in order to know it, because it's so memorable. With the triumphant trumpets and the guitars carrying that feeling of being an unstoppable force to be reckoned with, making every step you need to prepare for the big challenge ahead fly by. and the inclusion of these short but powerful vocals. We then cut back to Rocky on his jog, and in one long shot without any fancy or crazy editing effects, we see Rocky run faster and faster along the dockside. His training has paid off and now he's starting to get stronger. He approaches the stairs with much more confidence and energy than before and begins to sprint his way up. These stairs that were once hell to climb are now nothing. He reaches the top, bursting with enthusiasm, and for the very first time does his iconic arm-raising pose. He's in the best shape he's ever been in years, and is ready for anything that fight is prepared to throw at him. In an already inspiring film, this is one iconic scene that is still to this day one of the most inspirational moments in cinema, hitting every note flawlessly and gives every person watching the belief they can do anything with the right determination. Fantastic. But before that fight can begin, there's one more scene we need to tackle. What is undoubtedly the most important scene in the whole film, that the producers initially wanted to skip because of budgeting problems, but Stallone insisted it was included in the film. It starts off with a little moment of Rocky visiting the Spectrum where the fight is going to take place, where he bumps into Juergens. He says that the poster drawing of him is wrong, that he's meant to be wearing white pants with a red stripe instead of red pants with a white stripe. Which, fun fact, was actually a genuine goof made by the production crew behind the scenes that they decided to write into the story. Juergens shrugs this off, saying all that's important is that they give the audience a good show before leaving. Rocky 2 takes this moment to slowly leave the building as a quiet piano version of Gonna Fly Now plays. He comes back home while Adrian is in his bed, sits down beside her, and says the last thing we'd ever expect to hear out of our protagonist at this point in the film. Right before his moment of triumph, right before he's supposed to take on the biggest challenge in his life, he says,
Can't do it.
What?
I can't beat him.
Apollo?
Yeah. I've been out there walking around, thinking. I mean, who am I kidding? I ain't even in the guys' league.
This is far from what we'd ever want to hear Rocky say right now. We literally just saw him in an inspiring training montage, showing how hard he's worked for this moment and how ready he is for the fight, only for him to say he's just a nobody who isn't even in Apollo's league. To have this bombshell dropped on us is so impactful, making us question, if he's not doing it to win the fight, what is he doing it for? Turns out he doesn't care about being the winner, and all he wants is to survive the full 15 rounds of the fight.
It really don't matter if I lose this fight. It really don't matter if this guy opens my head either. Because all I want to do is go the distance. Nobody's ever gone the distance with Creed. And if I can go that distance, seeing that bell rings and I'm still standing, I'm gonna know for the first time in my life, see, that I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood.
This scene couldn't be placed anywhere else other than right here in order to work. Had it been placed somewhere before the montage, that whole scene wouldn't have hit us hard because we know he's not really doing it to win. Had we discovered his goal in the last minutes of the film after the fight was over, the audience would be left confused in the mood whiplash of the moment and not have enough time to soak in that message before the film ends. It had to be right here to work and delivers on exactly what it needs to, telling the audience exactly what Rocky's mindset is going into the fight, and that a tried and true victory in his eyes is taking all the punishment Apollo can dish out and still be standing. A real metaphor for how he's taken on his life both in and out of the ring for the past 10 years and still moving forward. The only thing left to ask now is, can he do it? Fight night is finally here. We know the characters, we know the stakes, all that remains now is for our protagonist and his opponent to throw down. Rocky shares one last moment with Adrian, making jokes so both he and her can remain calm about what's about to happen.
I'll wait for you here.
Well, how about I wait here and you fight, huh?
Before he heads out the door to his big challenge, with Adrian waiting for when he comes back. Don't worry, she's not leaving him by not going to watch his fight. She'd just rather not see someone that she cares for get beaten the shit out of. Here, we're able to take note of how each fighter enters the ring, which clearly displays their mindset going in. Rocky is going in very casually, politely waving to people and joking about his baggy robe, keeping himself composed before he's about to take on one hell of a beating to go the distance. Even with the crowd happy to see him, which is a hell of an improvement from the audience in his fight at the club from the opening, he doesn't try to soak in the attention. He's here to prove his own self-worth and let his fighting in the ring do the talking. Then we see Apollo enter the ring, and he is carrying a vastly different energy altogether. Dressed as the first US President, George Washington, throwing pieces of money into the crowd with an upbeat fanfare, and the spotlight both metaphorically and literally on him. Hardly paying any attention to Rocky, he climbs into the ring and reveals his second costume, Uncle Sam, a nickname given to the United States from the political comic character of the same name, used in recruitment posters for World War I, who, if you're curious, was based on a New York meat packer named Samuel Wilson, whose salted beef company kept the soldiers of the United States Army well fed during the War of 1812. Apollo is here as the showman we know him to be. With so much of an ego you could see him from miles away even without the fancy costumes. Their names are read aloud to the crowd, they are given the rules by the referee, they are primed and ready to begin as they back off into their corners. The bell for round 1 rings and the fight is officially underway. Taking it slowly at first, Apollo is more so dancing around, throwing a couple of jabs while Rocky isn't landing any punches yet. Being the biggest showman of the two, Apollo is taunting Rocky for the crowd's amusement, luring him into punches under his breath and still just dancing around. He thinks he's in charge, he thinks he's got this fight in the bag, so unknowingly leaves himself more open than he thinks, and then...
Hey, I don't believe it! Hey, the champ is down! Yes, he is! Reed is down! What a surprise this is!
Rocky with a good old left-handed uppercut knocks Apollo down. The first time he's been knocked down in his career as champion. And believe it or not, while he does get up from that punch before being counted out by the referee, it was that one punch that solidified Rocky is going to last this fight. Because Apollo didn't prepare for a challenge like this. So much as he tries to dish out some lethal blows to Rocky after that southpaw strike he claimed he'd have no problem with.
He's a southpaw. I don't want you messing around with southpaws. Now, you do everything back.
Southpaw nothing. I'll drop him in 3.
I don't believe it!
He's completely thrown for a loop. Round 1 ends with Rocky also experiencing a first in his fights, getting his nose broken.
Your nose is broken.
How's it look?
That's an improvement.
While in their corners, he lets Rocky know specifically where he needs to aim for, telling him to go for body shots to the ribs. But in Apollo's corner, Tony is more vague about the fighting strategy and just tells him generally what to do.
He doesn't know it's a damn show. He thinks it's a damn fight. Finish this bum and let's go home.
Round 2 begins, and it's clear things are much more violent than round 1, as both fighters have now entered the ring with the mindset to fight. Or at least one of them has. Again, Apollo is trying to shake himself out of the performer mindset into a fighter mindset, while Rocky was in a fighter's mindset from the very start, taking punch after deadly punch from Apollo and still hitting back just as strong, with the actuality of the scene amplifying the impact of what's going on as their punches and heavy breathing is barely audible over the cheering crowd and the talking from the commentators. And as round 2 comes to a close, we enter another montage as rounds 3 through 14 pass by. This time, the montage isn't showcasing the progress of achieving a skill, it's showing the exhaustion, struggle, and heavy hits these two mighty warriors are enduring for what will potentially be 15 2-minute rounds. Fun fact, these rounds were actually filmed in reverse. Not actually in reverse like some strange Rocky Tenet hybrid, I mean in reverse order. That way the makeup team could remove the work on the swollen eyes and the bleeding noses as they went along, without the makeup looking tacky. The song being played, Going the Distance, Like Gonna Fly Now from the previous montage, really elevates the fight passing by before our eyes. John Avildsen actually showed Bill Conti the fight footage playing Beethoven's Sixth Symphony and said that was the kind of classical style feeling he wanted to move the fight up to a grander scale, and he absolutely delivered with this majestic music piece. Especially once we get to round 14, when Apollo knocks Rocky down to the ground. But even with Mickey telling him now's the time to give up,
Down, down, stay down.
We know that that is the last thing Rocky would ever do right now. Adrian enters, and upon seeing the closest person in her life beaten to such a state, she is so upset by this because she too knows what is going through Rocky's mind right now, and prays that the gentle soul she fell in love with and learned to be herself around makes it back in one piece. Apollo turns around, exhausted and frustrated, seeing who he believed was just a fancy name for a spectacle still standing, heading back into battle to try and finish what he started. Once again, making the same mistake of underestimating Rocky, thinking he was finished this time, as Rocky lands 3 direct hits straight to the ribs, breaking them in the process as round 14 concludes. The tension is at its peak when Rocky's eye becomes so swollen that they have to cut it in order to reduce the swelling. It's clear Rocky can't take much more of this shit, but he's not about to give up. Nor is Apollo, who, while he's finally managed to get into the fighter's mindset, he's out of breath and his ribs are broken. He too is in the mind not to give up.
You're bleeding inside, champ. I'm gonna stop the fight. Hey, you understand? You ain't stopping nothing, man. You ain't stopping nothing.
The final round begins, and it's all a matter of who has the last burst of energy left in them. They trade lethal blow after lethal blow, with Apollo seeming on top at first and ready to deliver those final shots to finish Rocky, but Rocky comes back swinging and holds him off with what little energy he has left, with not only his friends, but the entire arena cheering him on to win. He delivers one last left swinging hook to Apollo's face and...
Ain't gonna be no rematch. Ain't gonna be no rematch.
Don't want one.
Rocky has done it. Against the odds, to prove his self-worth, he went the distance in a fight with the heavyweight champion of the world. He doesn't care if he won or not, nor do we the audience care, as the song The Final Bell blares over Jurgens announcing the split decision victory over the fight going to Apollo Creed. In the chaos and distortion now that the fight is over, all Rocky wants right now is to be beside his soulmate.
Adrian! What do you think about when the 15th round when you're coming out?
Adrian!
Rocky! Rocky! Rocky!
Adrian sees him calling her name and so barges her way through the hectic, noisy crowd to get to him. Again, a far cry from where she used to be at the start of this film. Her shyness is completely gone and she has the confidence to fight to reach who she wants, her soulmate. She's struggling to get there as Rocky continues to call out her name while being surrounded by the press, asking him questions he doesn't care to answer. We see Paulie in his shining moment trying to fight his way into the ring to be there for his friend who, if he were anyone else, would have left him alone, but didn't because he somehow saw good in his heart. And Paulie proves him right. As Adrian makes it to the ring, in a subtle, heroic moment I mentioned earlier, Paulie distracts the police guarding the ring and lifts up the rope so that Adrian can get in. The two make it into each other's arms to celebrate the victory he had aimed for all along, and right here, something beautiful happens. Adrian has just fought her way through a huge crowd of people to reach Rocky. Something she had the confidence to do because Rocky was such a gentle and loving person to help bring it out of her. She now realises how much she cares for Rocky being there for her, as much as she was there for him, and right there and then, lets him know just how much she cares.
I love you!
This, believe it or not, was not the original ending to the film and was actually from a result of reshoots. The original ending had the fight end in a draw and Rocky walks out of the ring to meet Adrian outside of the arena. The two would then walk down the street hand in hand through a nearby tunnel. This was found to be too depressing by test audiences, and thus the reshoots of this film's now official ending were made. All existing footage of the scrapped ending was reportedly incinerated by United Artists during the 1980s, but we still have existing stills of what would have been the original ending to Rocky. Some parts of it were even used as part of the original posters for the film, with the silhouette of Rocky and Adrian walking hand in hand. Regardless, I'm glad they went with the ending they decided to use here. It ends right where it needs to and delivers an ending where you could stop right here without making any more films, and it'd be a hopeful, happy ever after type ending that just feels so right. The idea of continuing the story almost seems nonsensical because everything has come to a phenomenal end. How can a sequel improve upon this? Well, that's what we'll soon find out next time. But for now, let's wrap up this story. Rocky is the definite article of an underdog story, both the story on screen and off screen. The most down on his luck nobody, stuck in a deadbeat life with seemingly no chance of succeeding, finding both an opportunity to make it into the big leagues and a reason to persevere through it all, winning over the hearts of those who either looked down on him or just had no idea who he was, or if his talents were worth the time and effort investing to in the first place. With both the fictional and behind the scenes story being very similar tales, it elevates Rocky 1 from just being another film to a shining example of how art imitates life, a trait this franchise would carry in its core for later films to come, making them all the more fascinating and engaging as a result, giving inspiration to all who watch it to make the most out of what you have and do the best that you believe yourself can do. An iconic story, fantastically natural characters, great direction, great writing, awesome music, and consistent themes and morals. It's no wonder that this film has left such an impact on people, both as a cinematic story and a message of inspiration to all.